year was 1887, and the little cattle town of Dry Gulch, New Mexico, baked under a merciless August sun. Dust devils spun down the single street like restless ghosts, and the air smelled of horse sweat, whiskey, and gun oil. At the far end of that street stood the Red Dog Saloon, its batwing doors creaking day and night, piano music spilling out like blood from a fresh wound. Everyone in town knew the Red Dog was owned by Harlan McAllister, the biggest rancher for 200 miles in every direction, a man whose shadow stretched longer than the gallows on Boot Hill. They said he owned half the judges, all the sheriffs, and every drop of water that dared to flow through his land. Men crossed the street when they saw his black Stetson coming. Women looked down and hurried past. Children were told his name the way other children were warned about rattlesnakes. Inside the Red Dog that evening, the air was thick with cigar smoke and the sour tang of spilled bourbon. The poker tables were full, the bar 3 deep with cowboys just in off the trail, and the new girl, Lila Moreau, was singing on the little stage beside the piano. She had arrived only 3 weeks earlier on the afternoon stage from Santa Fe, 22 years old, black hair cascading like a midnight river, skin the color of fresh cream, eyes the green of high mountain pines. She wore a crimson dress cut daringly low, and every man in the room felt his heart stutter when she smiled. She sang in a voice that could break a man in half, slow, husky French songs nobody understood but everybody felt deep in their bones. When she finished, La Vie en Rose, the room went so quiet you could hear the ice melting in the whiskey glasses. Then the applause exploded like gunfire. Harlan McAllister sat alone at his private table in the back corner, the one with the velvet rope nobody else dared cross. He wore a black frock coat, black vest, black hat pushed back just enough to show the scar that ran from his left eyebrow to the corner of his mouth, a souvenir from a Comanche lance 20 years earlier. His eyes were the pale gray of winter sky before a killing blizzard. He watched Lila the way a wolf watches a wounded deer. When she stepped off the stage, he crooked one finger. The bartender, a man missing 3 fingers on his left hand thanks to a previous disagreement with McAllister, hurried over to her and whispered something. Lila's smile faltered for half a heartbeat, but she squared her shoulders and walked toward the velvet rope. The room watched. Nobody spoke. Even the piano player let the last chord die. She stopped in front of McAllister's table. Up close, he was bigger than the stories made him, 6.5 feet tall, shoulders wide enough to block out the lantern light. A Colt .45 rode low on his hip, the ivory grips worn smooth from use. "Evenin', Miss Moreau," he said, voice like gravel dragged across iron. "Sit." It wasn't a request. Lila sat. A waiter appeared with a fresh bottle of French champagne, real champagne, not the rotgut they sold at the bar, and 2 glasses. McAllister poured. His hands were huge, scarred, the knuckles flattened from breaking more than just Broncos. "You sing real pretty," he said. "Reminds me of New Orleans. Ever been?" "No, sir," she answered, her French accent curling around the words like smoke. "But my mother was from there." He studied her the way a man studies a branding iron before pressing it to a calf's hide. "Your mother teach you anything else besides singing?" Lila met his gaze. "She taught me how to spot a wolf even when he's wearing a man's skin." A ripple of laughter almost escaped the nearest table, but one look from McAllister turned it into coughs. He smiled, thin and cold. "Careful, little French girl. Wolves bite." He raised his glass. She raised hers. They drank. Over the next hour, Harlan McAllister did what he always did. He bought round after round for the house, told stories of driving 10,000 longhorns up the Chisholm Trail, laughed too loud, and every time Lila tried to excuse herself, he laid one massive hand on her wrist, not squeezing, not yet, just reminding her whose roof she was under. The saloon filled with more of his men, rough, trail-dusty riders wearing the Bar M brand, their eyes hard and hungry. The regular customers started drifting out. Nobody wanted to be there if things turned ugly, and everybody knew they always did when Black McAllister decided he wanted something. At 11 o'clock, the batwing doors opened again and Sheriff Ben Whitlock stepped in, badge glinting under the lanterns. He was a decent man once, before McAllister bought him the way you buy a new pair of boots. Now he just looked tired. He walked straight to McAllister's table. "Harlan," he said, touching the brim of his hat to Lila, "got a wire from the territorial capital. Judge says that water rights case is coming up next month. Thought you'd want to know." McAllister didn't even glance up. "Tell the judge I'll be there. Tell him to bring a lunch, he might be a while." The sheriff hesitated, eyes flicking to Lila's white knuckles around her glass. "Miss Moreau, you all right?" Before she could answer, McAllister's voice cut through the smoke like a knife. "She's finer than frog hair, Ben. Why don't you go enforce something that needs enforcing?" Whitlock left without another word. The doors swung shut behind him like a coffin lid. Midnight came and went. The piano player was sent home. The bartender locked the front doors for safety. Only McAllister's men remained, maybe 20 of them, drunk and mean. Lila tried once more to stand. This time McAllister's hand closed around her wrist hard enough to bruise. "You ain't leavin' yet, Songbird," he said softly. "We're just gettin' started." He stood, towering over her, and dragged her toward the back hallway that led to the private rooms upstairs. She stumbled, heels catching on the sawdust floor. One of the cowboys laughed. Another started clapping slow, like it was all a show. Lila twisted, trying to pull free, but it was like fighting a cottonwood tree. That was when the shotgun boomed. The sound cracked through the saloon like God's own judgment. Every head whipped toward the bar. Standing atop it, legs spread for balance, was a woman nobody in Dry Gulch had ever seen before. She wore a long black duster, men's trousers tucked into high boots, and a flat-crowned hat pulled low. In her hands was a double-barreled 12-gauge with the barrels sawed down to legal sin. Her face was half hidden by a red bandana, but her eyes burned like coals in a forge. The room froze. She racked the shotgun, one shell spent, one still hungry, and the metallic chunk-chunk echoed off the walls. "Let the girl go, McAllister," she said, voice low, steady, carrying the soft drawl of East Texas. "Right now." McAllister released Lila so suddenly she fell to her knees. His hand dropped to his Colt. "You know who I am," he growled. "I know exactly who you are," the woman on the bar answered. "And I know what you did to Rosa Delgado outside Lubbock in '84. I know what you did to Mary Two Bears up on the Staked Plains in '85. I know about the Kiowa girl last spring. And tonight you were fixin' to add another name to that list." She swung the shotgun toward the ceiling and pulled the second trigger. The blast shredded the chandelier. Glass and burning kerosene rained down. Men screamed, diving for cover. In that moment of chaos, the woman leaped from the bar, landed cat-light, and snatched Lila by the arm. "Come on, honey." They ran for the back door. McAllister roared like a gut-shot bear and yanked his Colt free. He fired 3 times, boom, 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 the bullets splintering the doorframe inches from their heads. The woman in the duster spun, dropped to one knee, and drew a Navy revolver from under her coat faster than any man in the room thought possible. She fired once. The bullet took McAllister high in the right shoulder, spinning him halfway around, blood spraying across the poker table. His men went for their guns, but the woman was already moving, dragging Lila through the kitchen and out into the alley. Horses waited there, 2 of them, saddled and ready. She threw Lila up onto the first and vaulted onto the second. Behind them, the saloon doors burst open and McAllister staggered out, one arm hanging useless, the other clutching a Henry repeater one of his men had shoved into his good hand. "Get M," he screamed. "Every man. $1,000 to the one who brings me that bitch alive." Hooves thundered. Lanterns bobbed. Gunfire cracked behind them as the woman and Lila galloped into the night, racing west toward the black silhouette of the Guadalupe Mountains. They rode hard for an hour, maybe more, until the horses were lathered and blowing. Only then did the woman slow, leading them off the trail into a dry wash hidden by cottonwoods. She swung down, helped Lila to the ground. Lila was shaking so hard her teeth chattered. The woman pulled down her bandana. Lila gasped. The face beneath was beautiful in a hard, sun-leathered way, high cheekbones, full mouth, and a scar that ran from the corner of her left eye down to her jaw. But it was the eyes that stopped Lila's heart, the same green as high mountain pines. The same eyes that looked back at her from the mirror every morning. You look just like," Lila whispered. "I'm Evangeline Moreau," the woman said. "Your sister. The one our mother never told you about. The one McAllister left for dead outside Lubbock 9 years ago." She reached into her saddlebag and pulled out a folded piece of paper, yellowed and creased. She handed it to Lila. It was a wanted poster, $5,000 reward, dead or alive, for the Black Bandana, a female outlaw accused of 7 murders, train robbery, and burning half, and it's going to be a bloodbath the likes of which the West has never seen. Don't miss it. Subscribe now.